Happy day after Christmas, everyone. Thank you for joining us this week as we've had Christmas in the Septuagint. One last time, welcome, Patrick Schreiner. Thanks for being with us this week.
Good to be with you again. I always wear the same clothes.
Indeed, so do I. And we're going to be looking at Matthew's use of Jeremiah, so let's dig in. The fifth and final major use of the Old Testament in Matthew's birth narrative comes from Jeremiah 31, according to the Masoretic numbering, 38, according to the Greek numbering, verse 15. It's a bit lengthy, but let's dig in, and then we'll have a conversation about its implications in Matthew. Hutos epen Kyrios, phone in Rama ekuste, threnu kai klauthmu kai adormu. Let's start with the hutos. So, thus, or in this manner, apen, third singular aorist, the Lord here. So, thus said the Lord. Phone, a voice or a sound in Ramah. So, we'll talk about where Ramah is and why it's being used here. But we have akuste. This is from akuo. And you'll notice with the lengthening of the alpha, the theta, eta, this is a third singular aorist passive indicative. So, a voice in Ramah is heard. And what is this voice? And we just have a chain of words here. Threnu here. It is a voice of lamentation. So that's what threnos is. And klauthmos is weeping. And then adormu is mourning. So we have lamentation, we have weeping, and we have mourning. So it's a voice of those three things with that genitive there. Now, who is crying? Rachel apokleamene. Uk ethelin pausastai, epitois huiois autes hati uk asen. So this is the explanation of who this voice is, why it's weeping, and so forth. And we start with this noun. It's Rachel here, as we'll see. And then apokleamene is from apokleio. You'll see with the mene ending, this is a nominative singular feminine because it matches Rachel. It's a present middle participle. And in a certain sense, this would be adjectival or attributive. It's describing her crying, and then she's the one who's referring back to the voice. So it's the voice of Rachel crying or weeping here. We continue with an explanation of why exactly she's weeping. Uk, that's not Athelin here. This is from thelo. You'll notice that often thelo lengthens with an eta as opposed to an epsilon. Third singular ending. This is a third singular imperfect active indicative. So she is not desiring pausastai. Now, pauo is the aorist middle infinitive here. You can see that with the astai ending. And that means to cease or to stop. So she is not desiring to stop. So she's weeping without pause. She doesn't want to end. Now, for whom is she weeping? Epitois huiois, upon or for the sons, and it's her son. So she is weeping and does not want to stop for her sons. Now, why is that? Because uk asen, they are no longer. And so it's a very interesting place to start here, because the question is, well, what in the world is Matthew doing with this? Why does he go to this passage? So on that note, let's turn to Matthew and let's get into the details.
So the fifth fulfillment quotation in Matthew comes from Jeremiah 31:15. You can read of that in Matthew 2:17 through 18. Again, just to set the context slightly, Herod has massacred the baby boys in Jerusalem. And Matthew, therefore, pulls up this text from Jeremiah 31, and he says this kind of lamentation in Bethlehem fulfills this text that a voice was heard in Ramah, weeping, great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and she refused to be consoled because they are no more. Again, if you look at the Greek, there are some minor changes in terms of some words are left off, like lamentation. But he seems to just kind of be cinching it up and summarizing. I'm looking at if there's any other changes. There's some
slight
other
participle changes, but nothing major. Yeah.
but nothing major. I think the big question is, like, why does he pull out this text?
This one's so random, it seems like.
What's going on? Well, in Jeremiah, what you have in the context in Jeremiah 31, if you remember, is actually a hopeful text. And right in the middle, you have this weeping. It's a new covenant text. But you have Ramah is the place where Israel was carried off into exile. And so what Jeremiah is picturing, this is a little hard to conceive of, is Jeremiah is picturing Ramah is, let me state this as well, Ramah is also a place where Rachel is buried. And so Rachel in Jeremiah 31:15, he's picturing her poetically, like in the grave, watching her children go off into exile. And she's weeping and mourning because of that. And so what Matthew is doing is he's picking up on that and he's saying Rachel, in one sense, is weeping again because she's watching her children be massacred. So there's again the exile themes are coming up with this massacre of the young boys in Jerusalem. Rachel again weeps for her children. But what's so interesting about this text is as you keep reading Jeremiah 31:16, he actually goes on to say, keep your voice from weeping, your
Right.
eyes from tears. They shall come back from the land of the enemy. There is a hope for your future. And so, what I think Matthew is doing, he's saying, yes, the King Herod is acting like this oppressor to God's people, and Rachel weeps again. But if you read that in context, which is how we're supposed to read all of these, Jeremiah also recognizes that Jesus will be the one to end that mourning for his people. He will bring them back from exile. Rachel will no longer be weeping because there's hope for a future, because a new king is here. The Davidic one is actually going to sit on the throne, and he will provide for his people. So I think even though he just quotes this kind of negative portion of 15, he's probably thinking of the whole context, because really all of Matthew is getting at Jesus is coming to fix the situation that Israel has found themselves in. They need to be, his name, saved from their sins. He is Yeshua. He is the one to save them.
Right.
And so I actually think there's a lot of hope in this quotation if you're able to kind of go back and expand the context and see uh, Jeremiah believes that there is hope for the future, and so does Matthew. And Matthew is saying that hope is now. So again, you have there's patterns again, as we've
Right.
seen every day this week, that are fulfilled in Jesus. Even what I say in a few of my books, Jesus is largely passive in the first two chapters because he's a
Right.
child, right? He's being most of the gospel. Jesus is the one, the actor, the main actor in the narrative. Here, his parents are kind of bringing him along from place to place. And even in that, God is providentially working to fulfill the scriptures, which is just an amazing thing to think about, right? That they are fleeing to Egypt. They're coming out of Egypt. He's born in Bethlehem, and the final one, he shall be called a Nazarene. All of these places, even as Jesus is just a child, are fulfilling Old Testament texts. And so it's actually a really fun text as you begin to think about how, in one sense, how complicated it is that you have this woman, looking out at her children from the grave poetically and weeping for them. And Matthew saying, oh, yes, this is happening again, but now we have someone to fix it.
Yeah. No, I mean, what's so interesting about this one compared to some of the others is that if you've been taught, like, okay, you see the New Testament quoting the Old Testament, and you just sort of read it and you move on, it's like, okay, that's a proof text, something like that. This one doesn't work that way at all. Like, if you just like, oh yeah, this is patently obvious, it's a virgin birth, like Isaiah 7:14. It's like you read this one, like, I have no idea why he's quoting this. It forces you. This is a great place where it's like, if you want to teach someone that you've got to trace this down and you got to go look it up in Jeremiah and then you got to read the context to make any sense of it, this is one of the marquee examples, because otherwise it does not make sense.
That's right.
Why he meant, like, why Rachel? Why is she crying? Where's Ramah? Like, none of that would make any sense. And so Matthew's assuming that you're doing that hard work.
That's
Back
right.
on the Rachel thing,
You have to know what Rama is and what happened there,
right.
which is,
yeah, I mean,
you have to do
look it up
some
in a
research.
concordance.
And again, there's a flexibility here where he's recognizing significant realities are happening at Ramah, and he's tying those all together through the scriptures. And
Yeah. And it's interesting, you mentioned the birthplace. So as I understand it, there's, so Rachel was the mother of Judah and Benjamin.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're talking about Southern Kingdom. So that's relevant because that's kind of geographically where we are. There is some debate about her burial place. So in Genesis 48, she's buried at Ephrath, which has come into play with the Micah quotation. And then the Hebrew Bible says that is Bethlehem, which is the first appearance of Bethlehem. Now, there is some debate that she's farther north, but the sort of traditional location is that she is buried in one of the sort of corners of Bethlehem. And so it could be that connection, if that's the traditional burial place, that initially draws Matthew's attention, because this is going down in Bethlehem.
Yeah, I've struggled. That's helpful because I've struggled with, like, are they traveling through Ramah? It doesn't explicitly say, what I mean? Like, I'd have to pull out a map again and kind of look at everything, but Rama kind of feels like it comes out of nowhere. I mean,
Yeah, well, yeah. If you look at Jeremiah 31, I think you're right. Typically, if you know anything about covenant theology, it's like, oh, Jeremiah 31 is one of the ones I'm supposed to memorize. Like that's a new covenant passage. Why all this
that's right.
devastation? So that's an interesting part of it. But if you read on in Jeremiah chapter 40, that, and you already mentioned this, that is where the southern kingdom deportees, the exiles, were gathered. They were shipped north to Ramah, which is just north of the border, and then they're taken across the river into Babylonia. And so even in Jeremiah's day, Rachel is in her homeland. She's seeing her offspring because she's like the matriarch, if you will, of the
That's right.
southern kingdom.
That's
She's
right.
seeing them go to Ramah and then from there be taken into exile. So, how would that fit with the broader kind of exodus or return from exile theme in Matthew? Why does he draw? If Rachel connects it to Bethlehem, which I think that's plausible in
Hmm.
his mind, what's he trying to get at as he's bringing the birth narrative to a close by going here? I mean, I think you
Hmm.
touched on it, but just sort of put a bow around
Yeah.
it. What's he trying to
Yeah,
teach in terms of?
I wonder if he's somewhat doing like this is the final weeping before the Davidic king, comes of age.
Yeah,
Because what you have in the next chapter is the anointing of Jesus, his baptism.
right,
And so there's a sense of which I think, and not everyone agrees with this, but the exile, not maybe physical exile, but the spiritual exile has continued
hmm,
from the deportation to Babylon and Assyria as well. And so even when the people returned to their land, the presence of God didn't dwell with
right.
the temple or on the temple as before. And
You're
so
still waiting for that in
this is
Malachi
kind of this
4 and so.
climactic, and certainly there will be a kind of another climactic at the end, but this weeping and this tribulation that Jesus now reverses though in his person. And so I would say all these quotations that we've gone through actually have an original context of you're in exile,
Right.
but because this person is coming, you won't be in exile anymore. And again, I don't just mean like physical exile. I more mean like spiritual, estranged from God
Right.
because of because you've broken the covenant is the
Yeah.
big problem here. You've sinned against God's law, and therefore you need this Messiah to come. The discipline, even in Jeremiah 31:18, like the discipline has come upon them, and now the discipline will fully and finally come upon Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And it's
Um,
interesting if you mentioned this, like you have this great Jeremiah 31 promise in verses 10 and 11 that God has scattered Israel, so that's the historical exile. But you're right, there is an ongoing spiritual sense. You actually see that in the intertestamental literature. Even though they've come back and rebuilt the temple, they still feel estranged from God. The glory's not there, and so forth. God's going to bring them back. Rachel's weeping, and then you're right. You pointed this out. God says, "Stop crying, right?
Stop crying. That's
Stop
right.
crying, because they're going to come back." And so, what's interesting about that is that you've had all of this start in the vicinity of Jerusalem, where they were sent
Hmm.
out from.
Yeah.
Jesus now has come on the scene. He's been born. He's gone to Egypt. He's come back, etc. Next chapter, he's going to begin his adult ministry. And then you fast forward to chapter 28, and now he's sending effectively from Jerusalem,
That's right.
plus surrounding environs, he's sending out to the nation. So there's
That's
almost
right.
you have a reversal of the exile, and then a double inversion, now sending them back out to the
That's right.
nations. Yeah.
And you have
So,
Matthew 10, is it 10 and 15, where he says, I was sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel.
right.
And so he's drawing them back in. He's bringing them back in. And then in Matthew 28, he sends them, what I would call kind of restored Israel, out into the nations.
Right.
So he's calling his people back through, it's confusing to us because Matthew, in one sense, has a strong Gentile focus from the beginning, but then he's always like, "Hey, don't go among the Samaritans."
Right. Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
like, "Wait a second, I thought." But we're sitting at this transition of salvation history where he
Yeah.
has come for Israel to restore Israel, and as Israel is restored, as Abraham was called to be a light to the nations, then they can be a light to the nations. But he must do that as the true Israel. So he's calling his people back. And that's why he's like, no more weeping. It's done. Now we can move forward and be the light to the nations.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so fascinating to see. It starts with Abraham, who, as you know from Paul and elsewhere, he's the father of the Jews, but he's also really, before even that, he's essentially a Gentile. Jesus descends from him. you got this focus on Jerusalem, but right out of the gate, we saw this a couple days ago. You have the Magi come as the nations visiting an Israelite Jewish king, and then you have the kind of reversal of that. So there's so many layers. If anyone were interested in sort of tracing out these kinds of themes in Matthew, do you have any recommended resources?
I have this book that I forgot about last video called Matthew, Disciple and Scribe, where
But even biblical themes, for instance, in
oh,
Matthew.
biblical themes. Yes, I have a new one as well.
Yeah.
Matthew, the volume one of the New Word Biblical Themes, where I trace out some of this. So
Yeah.
you feel free to pick this up if this video, you just want more. You just want
Or
more.
or if you forgot a Christmas gift for your loved ones, you can now
That's right.
go
You need
do
a
that.
door stopper or something like that. You could pick up my book. So.
Very good. Well, thanks a lot, Patrick, for being with us this week, and it's been fun. So I appreciate your time.
Yeah, appreciate it. Good to be with you, Greg.
All right, man. Take care.